So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. We've got an incredible panel to kick off today's AI World Series conference. I'm Richard Kennedy. I'm one of the directors at the AI for Business Institute. I will be moderating the panel. We're going to start just by doing a quick round-robin introductions for each of you, and then we'll get into the questions and the nitty-gritty, if that's all right with everybody. Shayma, would you like to start? Ladies first.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Shayma, and I am the founder and the CEO of Digital Advice Consulting. We are a consultancy which is based here in UAE, and we are helping actually companies to get into the AI by providing AI readiness assessment, upskilling the workforce, and supporting the startup and innovation ecosystem by providing to the government entities acceleration programs, mentoring programs, and incubator as well. And we are since 1.5 years here in the market, and I'm very excited to be today here and looking forward to the panel.
Thank you. I'm Professor Graham Shapiro. So for 30 years, coming up in November, I've had Graham Shapiro Design, which is a visual communication company that has been creating visual communication for some of the world's most respected companies. I'm also a Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the University of Westminster in the United Kingdom. I'm an ambassador of innovation for the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom, and proud to be chairman of Architect Global.
Hello, hi, I'm Basil Fateen. I'm the principal technology evangelist for generative AI at Amazon Web Services, AWS. Part of what I do is I lead the Middle East and North Africa strategy for developer experience, and I work with the global generative AI service teams at AWS, like the ones building the Amazon Nova models and Amazon Bedrock. So my role is kind of in the middle between those building that generative AI technology and the ones who are using it to then build using that generative AI technology across all segments, from startups building their first MVPs to enterprises deploying POCs. And that gives me a very unique perspective on the very interesting times that we live in right now, where on one hand, it's extremely exciting. It's never been easier to bring your idea to life. The barriers to entry have never been lower, but at the same time, it's extremely overwhelming and ambiguous, and things are moving too fast, and no one knows what the hell is going on. So part of my role is to help people figure that out right now in the middle of all of the hype that we're all living in, and happy to discuss that more with you today. And thank you for having me.
Hi, Felicien Mathieu. I'm CTO for Worldwide Technology. We're a large system integrator based out of the US. And I'm based here, obviously. And last few years, we've been, really actively, deploying AI data center at very large scale. So we integrate for the hyperscalers and know a wide number of NCPs, so neo cloud providers. So that's on one end, that's a good part of my day. And then on the other end, we helping customer adopt AI. So that's deploying, full stack AI, and that's really where we help them, accelerate their scale. So deploying on-prem, but also integrating in the cloud actual use cases. So, doing rapid prototyping to ultimately bring ideas to life and, quickly identify, what works. And then go into a scale phase. So we do AI end-to-end, infrastructure, platform, and application development.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, we've got a panel that's a huge breadth. We've got academia, we've got consultancy, we have cloud, and we also have on-prem and infrastructure as well. And today we're talking about AI Unlocked, which is scaling innovation for business. And a lot of people think AI has just been around since ChatGPT, but I'm sure all of you agree that it's been around for a very long time. Machine learning, and obviously now we're just getting into the Gen AI side of things, and things are moving very quickly. But I think it's only been the last few years that people have talked about really using it in business, especially with the capabilities and how easy it is from people like AWS providing cloud services, how accessible these tools are now to SMEs as well as the enterprise. And I think we're now beginning to see that a lot of people have run pilots, have failed in pilots, have succeeded in pilots, and now it's about how do we scale, and that's what hopefully we can dig into today in this conversation. So I'm going to start with you, Shayma. From your work with advising companies, what's the most common reason AI projects stall before reaching that scale, and how can organizations overcome that?
I think coming from this consulting perspective, so I'm coming from a background of computer engineering and automotive sector of more than 15 years. What I see currently here in the region, right, let's say here in UAE, the biggest challenge are that companies are not ready. Ready in these terms, if it comes from an organizational perspective, a data perspective, or infrastructure and even business readiness, they start to jump immediately into buying in, but without having the foundation within the company itself. Means having a ready, let's say, leadership team who is committing to bring innovation within the company, upskilling the workforce, providing just the tools. It's not supporting the employees or where the innovation really starts. There is one biggest challenge, and I think on the data, we have a lot of companies which having huge data, but the data are not prepared, they are not cleaned, and they are siloed. There are no interconnections in between the data itself. So AI is working if you have clean foundations there. On the other side, what I also observe here as well, but also even outside of the country, you have the business readiness. You have processes there. I mean, on the startup ecosystem, it works quite well. It's easy. They are building the systems. But if it comes to enterprise, it's a huge process. You cannot just move from a company which is 30 years, 40 years having processes here within 2 months. You need a lot of preparation there. You need a lot of also quick wins, I would say, because there are lots of use cases currently on the market. But to start and I would say digging down and really show the return of invest of this use case, this is still a challenge from my perspective.
So do you think that use case is the place to start for organizations if they're thinking, let's go back to pilots before scaling, and organizations that are struggling to know where to start, do you think they should start with the use case, or do you think they should go all the way back to the beginning, make sure the data's clean, make sure everybody's trained, or do you think it's better just to go hard and fast? And
so if you would ask myself, when I started enter into a company and trying to support them to get into AI, having always the same question is like, how ready is the entire organization on these 4 pillars? How is the organization readiness, business, data, infrastructure? If we have a quite high percentage, I would say jump in and go. The second step where I would say is, which is the use case that bring quick wins within the organization and then is able to scale? That's my perspective.
perfect, thank you so much.
Which I just want to double click on how important that is, because with a lot of the business leaders, they buy into the hype and they see generative AI like magic, like it's going to magically plug in and solve all their problems and increase their revenue and optimize and they're going to be able to replace entire departments and all of this. And of course, this is far from the truth. Generative AI, it's a tool like any other tool. It's an incredible tool, but it's a tool nonetheless. And with any tool, it's about how you use it and knowing how to use it properly, and maybe more importantly, when not to use it. Because it does not solve every problem. There are some problems it's not fitted to solve. And that's why this is like prototyping this way is so important.
Yeah, and this is always the point that companies need to start, and I think it starts always from the top management. If the top management understand the need and the why and how we can move on, because it's a huge investment that you're doing on top of a running operations right now. So yes, we need to align on top level and then start.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Felicien, from a technology infrastructure perspective, what do companies have to get right? We've talked about internally, but from an infrastructure perspective, especially for enterprise, you know, AI is a huge task to get the infrastructure correct for, you know, billion-dollar businesses. And obviously you, in your work day-to-day, deal with that quite a lot. So how would you guide those businesses?
Yeah, so I think in general we've got really two types of customers. Yeah, we've got the customers who are, you know, ultimately building in public cloud. Yeah, so you know, if there is no really specific requirement around maybe data segregation, they're happy with using existing services, or maybe connecting into, you know, existing, you know, data set. It's easy to start. Yeah, like you can basically, you know, like start sort of day one. Yeah. And then we've got different set of customers who are really asking for like sovereign AI. So, you know, they want to deploy on-prem. They want to connect to internal data set. And so in that case, really some of the limitation we've got is, you know, infrastructure readiness, depending on what they want to deploy. Yeah? So we've got the small scale type deployment, you know, sort of AI in a box, which typically you can deploy in existing infrastructure, you know, like you're looking at, you know, data center that can host, you know, 10 to 15 kilowatt per rack. And then we've got on the other end the customer who want to deploy large scale, get the latest technology from the, you know, the likes of NVIDIA or AMD. And there, yes, you've got limitation in the sense they need to get the data center ready for that. Yeah, you're looking at, you know, very dense power requirement, new cooling requirements, which, you know, most data center are just not ready for. So you have to go through that retrofit phase, which, you know, can easily take, you know, 6 months to, you know, a year, depending on the state of it and supply chain. So, you know, that's what we've got to deal with. I wouldn't say it necessarily slows down the innovation, because, you know, again, you can start in the cloud, you can start showcasing use case with, you know, synthetic data. So we do a lot of that. Ourselves as an integrator, I mean, one of our key value proposition is we've got something called the Advanced Technology Center. So our CEO has been investing in, you know, in AI for, you know, quite a few years now. So, you know, already 3 years back, we started building, you know, ultimately quite advanced labs, so where we get, you know, all of the technology vendors into one place, hardware, software, which gives the opportunity to a customer to one, test the infrastructure, but also test the platform. Yeah. And our AI teams, so the developers, the PhDs, they also use this to develop the use case. Yeah. So it's a mix of, okay, how does that work on-prem? But they also use the cloud heavily. You know, so, you know, we are AWS big customers of ours, but we're also a big partner.
Is there a specific example that you can share of companies that are trying to scale and any roadblocks that they're coming across that you've seen? Is there any specific?
No, look, everybody I'm talking to is obviously implementing AI. The roadblocks. No, okay, back to, you know, there was a mention about use cases. You know, I think a big part of it is prioritization. You know, when you talk to a multinational, everybody wants AI. It's, you know, thousands of people. It's dozens of organizations. Everybody has a use case. Yeah, and us internally as well in Worldwide, we went through that process, and you end up with a list of, you know, 150 use cases you need to develop. And at the end of the day, there's so many developers and there's so many, you know, data scientists. So you need to prioritize, and you'll prioritize those based on ultimately what outcome do you want for the business. Yeah, and generally it's going to be, you know, revenue driven. Does it improve revenue? Does, you know, improve the efficiency? Does it reduce risk? And that's how we select it. Yeah? So typically where we're developing us internally, these use cases are for things that helps with the sales process, with the pre-sales, engaging with customer, customer engagement. So that's typically where we do it. And the roadblocks are really around data. You have to go through those iterations. Over the past few years, you've had different models, and different quality in terms of output. You've had to deal with hallucination. I was dealing with one of these issues again last week, and it's just getting better, week after week. So it's just a matter of iteration and again being able to fail fast. If you see it's not working, for a specific use case, just maybe wait and restart later on. But it's the same with customers. Like ultimately, big part of what we do is sitting down with them, understanding, okay, what use case they want to deliver, help them with that business case internally, just because otherwise they'll go nowhere. You might build a prototype and it's like, okay, cute, but what is actually delivering? And then getting, one big project I was delivering recently, issue is the same as usual. It's not really an AI problem. It's getting access to data. Yeah. Can I have it? You have to go through a few months of red tape before it's released. Yeah. So ultimately, the use case could be delivered quite quickly, but you have to go, and deal with this. And the last aspect is SMEs. Typically, if you want good business outcome, you need to sit down with a domain expert, and that's across any industry. And those people are busy. Yeah. So even if you bring in a good developer, a good data scientist, I'll need to get input from a user, and so you need to align all of this, and ultimately that's what can delay a project. But again, not too different from a traditional project.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Moving on to more cloud native solutions, Basil, how are those cloud native organizations like yourself helping people to scale more quickly, and what role does the platform ecosystem play in that?
Yeah, so since generative AI, whether you're just integrating with LLMs or small language models or building an agentic system, it's still part of a broader solution, right? And these broader solutions, they require much more as you're going through the entire prototyping phase to production. And this is one of the things that is also very important. I'm sure you find this, is that I think there's a big misconception still that you do a prototype, you get a thumbs up, and then you go to production. But that's not the case. Prototyping is a process, and it's an iterative process. Now, to be able to support this iterative process at every step requires more than just building one thing and getting the thumbs up from the guy at the top who signs the checks. You really want to think like a scientist. So you want to have these very scientific experiments that are data-driven to see, should you go on into that next phase of the prototype. And every one of these experiments has different variables. So going back to what the cloud offers, is the first thing is it offers a lot of choice to be able to control a lot of variables and to be able to manage that process as you're going through that prototyping process. So one, you want choice of models. For example, you want to try, does this model work for this use case or does it not work for this use case? Because again, a lot of people, when they think about generative AI, they think of OpenAI or Claude or these really large language models, which are amazing, but they are general models. And in any experiment also, there's no such thing as this was a good model and this was a bad model. Why? How are we quantifying that? We're looking at, precision of output. We're also looking at speed and time. How long is it taking these responses? And how much is it costing? These are all things you need to look at. And for a lot of these large language models, you often realize that they're not the best suited for a particular use case in an enterprise. Sometimes a very smaller language model that's trained on data does much better and is much quicker and much cheaper for that. So controlling these variables and being able to monitor them is very, very important. And this is one of the things that the cloud offers. The other things, of course, is that as you're growing your prototypes and going from like just a small handful of users to maybe hundreds or thousands or even millions of users, you want to be able to have the same level of performance. So you want it to be a robust architecture that scales out, that handles those loads, but also is very secure and has the right guardrails at every stage. And I think this is like really one of the most important things that organizations need to think about, is having those guardrails in place from day one. Because the thing that you realize at some point during the prototyping to production phase, which I'm sure you both see, is you start to get more of these edge cases that you did not predict or test for in the very early demo or prototyping phase. Now, you need to be able to handle those, because if it's any kind of a mission critical system, even if it's 5% or 3% or 2%, that might cost you more than if you had just not done this entire system. So the cost of things going wrong, those 2 or 3%, is very high in a lot of systems with the enterprise that may affect your projections, your strategy, or worst case scenario, your user experience. Because the users, they're not thinking about, oh, this was an LLM hallucinating. They're getting a bad experience with your organization or your company. And it's very hard to build trust over time and very easy to lose trust using from 1 or 2 bad experiences. So having that level of security to protect your user experience, to protect from also, someone had mentioned the personally identifiable data, like not leaking data, things like that. Those guardrails are also very important, and having that general level of observability into your generative AI or agentic system as you're going from prototyping to production. These are all things that the cloud is very important for, and plugging into your broader solution ecosystem of data specifically, like as you all mentioned.
Because I'm sure that you've seen a lot of pilots struggle to get past the scaling phase, past pilot. What are the key pitfalls that people can learn from? Not necessarily how do you avoid them, but if you do fail, how do you not feel disheartened to move forward and try something new? Just as Fee said, get back on the horse and try something else. Is there any advice that you can give to people that may have failed? And
there's a few of them. So of course she mentioned just the readiness of it and the data. A lot of companies don't realize the importance of the data they need to train the generative AI to be able to be effective within their organization. Now, generative AI, especially the large language models, they're trained on public data. But for a lot of these organizations, you need very specific information, either company data or workflow data. And that's why you mentioned the domain experts. And that's such an important thing, is how do you get that data from the domain experts and you train the models in a certain way, or you build a certain workflow that is actually able to effectively automate a process. This is a very important part of it. And not knowing what you're tracking also. People just throw money into a problem. They don't know what metrics are we tracking here. And you mentioned impacting revenue. That's a very high level goal. It's best to kind of prioritize different things in the workflow and the value chain to see where they're the biggest bottlenecks and friction points, and then start applying to that. So start narrow. This would be the one thing that I would say. Don't go so broad and think, I'm going to replace my marketing team, I'm going to replace my HR. This is dreams. It's better to start very small, very narrow, and then go prototyping to production on that narrow, and then start slowly expanding once you have certain metrics at scale.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Graham, we're going to shift a little bit away from the AI side of things and talk more about the innovation side, obviously being Professor of Innovation. Talking about organizational mindset, how can leaders foster that culture within the organization to go out, innovate, be entrepreneurs, and come up with new ideas for the business? Doesn't necessarily need to be AI, but innovation in general and scaling that. What are your thoughts on that and top tips for organizations?
What I would say is I'm not here to preach. It's just my opinion on the way I think that AI should maybe be structured within a business or innovation. And I can only kind of talk about what I've seen work and hasn't worked from kind of startups and bigger businesses. I think it needs to be broken down into segments within a business, and it starts with the CEO leadership initially, particularly with AI and innovation, that leaders now need to start considering that it's not like an IT project or a bolt-on initiative, that they need, their businesses need to live and breathe AI and innovation, like you would the foundations of a house. And I think once a CEO and leader understands that it needs to be an integral part of the whole business, then they can consider scale and moving forward. I think the next element then is the organizational values and the structure of the organization itself. So, for example, don't allow employees to work in like silos. So within my organization, for example, we're design and visual communication. So we've got design AI, marketing AI, accounts AI, and then each leader within the department will be the head of AI. And then we create like an innovation framework where it can happen seldomly, like once a month they all meet to discuss the crossover so that everybody is kind of singing from the same hymn sheet. We're all singing from the same hymn sheet. We mentioned data. I mean, that's so underestimated. I think for any business to be successful with innovation and AI within any business, the data needs to be clean and the best data you can get. I think leaders and employees need to consider data like security and encryption within a business. That's how important I value it and how important I think it is. Systems, procedures and processes then, that's also very important. I see so many businesses where they're not consistent with the tools that they're using. I'm not here to preach which one's best, but it's a bit like in the early days of website development with CMS systems where there was like WordPress and Drupal. They're all brilliant. It's whichever you choose to adapt and work with that's best for you. But just make sure that employees aren't going off on a tangent and deciding to use what they want. There needs to be consistency with the software. I think we've mentioned this again today, but there's this line that fail fast, fail early, fail forward. With development, there shouldn't be this methodology with innovation and AI about perfection before deployment. It shouldn't be like that. The line I always use is, you never lose, you learn. So make adaptations with AI and make sure things are being done quickly and efficiently, but you're going to make mistakes. Just learn from those mistakes. And I've seen the best businesses that continue to make the mistakes early and continue to change, but do it often. And then finally, the big one for me, the big mindset change, I think, is that everyone within a business starts to consider that AI and innovation is here to stay, and that it's not a hindrance, it's a help. And look at AI like an assistant. It's not here to take over people's jobs. The way I'll often look at it is the skill set of individuals and human beings should be yet best in their own abilities to do what they're best at doing. So, for example, within my business, I have the best designers. Allow the designers to do what they do. They can still come up with the best concepts, but AI is there to reflect and support them with the methodology, frameworks, wireframes, code that they need, mundane things that take time. And actually, if everyone starts to consider that AI will enhance any business to scale, they'll look back and think it will transform the way that they do things for the better.
I think it's a very valid point, because what I saw like 2-3 years ago when the first time AI was starting, most of people were really like, oh, my job will be replaced, I'm going to be replaced. This fear is moved out. What I see mainly right now on the ground, that people see now the value, and but it's also very important to let the human in the loop. Most companies still want to reduce headcount, saying, yeah, I want to replace one by whatever. I don't want to name it, but I always say, like, you can replace your human, but make sure the system will not be able to deliver the results that you really want, even though if you're increasing your, let's say, your revenue at the end and reducing the headcount, companies fail on that, on this level. So they turn back the employees back to the office because they saw actually what's really AI is possible to doing and where you still need the human in the loop.
That's a really good point, actually. The two that I've picked up on based on what you've said is AI 10 years ago, I didn't understand what it meant. And to be honest, I was ignorant to the world and what it meant and how it was going to affect people. And I was influenced more by what people were saying about it's going to change the world and replace humans. People are going to lose their jobs. And I was fearful of that. So I decided to go to the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom. And actually, I thought the best way to understand AI was to study it. And like I said, I came out with a completely different mindset that it's here to enhance and help us, not be a hindrance. The other thing I forgot to mention on skill set, I see so many businesses that fail with AI when they've decided to recruit or bring in what they consider to be specialist contractors. The best way to embrace AI within a business is to treat everybody, every single employee, as if they can have the skill set to understand and work with AI. So do workshops, send them on courses, because if you empower your employees with AI, they will stay with you and be part of it. I've seen businesses fail where they get off to a great start, but then a contractor isn't as loyal or be as committed. And I believe it starts within. You don't need to be a techie developer or a scientist or have IT knowledge, because that's the other kind of considered thing. Whatever background and wherever you're from, you can learn AI.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the commonalities between these things is really stressing beyond the technology the importance of the leadership mindset when embracing AI, and these are very positive mindsets to have, and I see them rarely, and I wish to see them more. Now, on the other side, what's been seen a lot, which is the more toxic kinds of mindsets, and I don't know if you've all seen this, but there was a report that came out recently that said among the organizations that said explicitly we are an AI first organization and clearly told their employees start using AI in your daily work, when they polled the managers about how they felt about the employees who used their work, they said the managers ranked them subconsciously less. So on one hand, you're telling employees use AI, on the other, you're feeling, oh, but he used AI, so, you know, and that's a big problem.
Yes, I'm training also C-level leaders on this area, and what I always see there, they have a lot of responsibilities on a daily basis. Now on top, there is a new technologies on the market which is heading all the time. You have to be on the, let's say, on the spot. We have to be the innovators within our segments or the industries or competitors, whatever. They don't literally have this time to get the knowledge. And I think from my perspective, it's very important that the organizations are giving the time or the freedom, let's say, in a way, to give them, to observe the technology, to learn, to understand, because once they really see the value or observe it in a better way, it is helping the entire organization, the ecosystem, to speed up, because the literacy of AI is still, from my point of view, very low on the ground itself. I mean, like if it comes to change, right, the change has a starting point and an end point. Even myself, being computer engineer for many years and worked in this ecosystem also 10 years already, but even for me as a tech person, it's not easy to keep up with the speed. And we have to see it from a perspective of another person which doesn't have this tech expertise. So you need to support them from the day one to enable them to get them into this tech world, I would say, because if it's prompting or whatever, there are still the foundations that people not using it. And because you have a lot of tools, and what I also see, companies are buying these amazing fancy tools, Copilot. And I was asked by one of the companies, we invested huge money in one of the tools, but we're not getting the results. We came in and we assessed the company and I said, like, what is about literacy, trainings, anything within the organization that the people know where, how. So there is the importance to, again, back to the employees. We need to start from down to uplift, to reskill them, because then the innovation starts by itself. So there are like two-way approach, from up and from down itself, to get people to the next level, or to bring to the change, I would say.
They're really good points, actually. Just on innovation itself as well, the word innovation, people will often consider that it means an invention or something unique. Innovation actually is a process or procedure, and I think from what you've said as well about embracing employees to be given the time to develop themselves. One of the best pieces of innovation within my own company came from my PA, actually. We developed system and procedure for streamlining projects, and she developed a project management system, and it changed the way our business operated, and it was her idea, so her concept. So that's whatever role within a business you are, anyone can be given the opportunity to innovate and make a big difference to a company.
In the next 2 to 3 years, Fee, I guess this is a good question for you. What do you think are going to be the biggest drivers for AI adoption? Do you think it's going to be regulation, the government pushing the use of AI more? Obviously, His Highness has really stepped behind AI here and has provided ChatGPT for all of the citizens. Or do you think it's going to be technology, or do you think it's actually going to be business reasons that people are going to adopt AI more and more, as we see over the next couple of years?
No, I think the biggest driver is just, evolution of the technology. I mean, we're already seeing it. Like, I mean, if we look at the past, 2 to 3 years, it's really ecosystem maturity that's been driving adoption. So initially, obviously, it was just, the ChatGPT type system. I think a big boost for us was businesses actually asking for AI, because we invested in AI a decade ago, actual machine learning, deep learning, things that now have a lot more demand. And before we used to to bang on all doors to try to sell projects. Now customers just ask for it. The teams are fully utilized. We've tripled the size of the AI delivery team. So that's one thing, and that's really a much more mature market. I mean, that's machine learning and deep learning. It's nothing new. On the generative AI side of things, that's really maturity of the ecosystem. So we've seen the likes of RAG system being implemented, and again it was a lot of new startups, MLOps vendors, shifting towards generative AI, tooling. Obviously, that helps with adoption. People getting trained on it, familiar with it, putting processes in place internally to be able to cope with security. And because yes, I mean, there's the prototyping side of things, and then there's connecting a system to your financial database. Do you really want anyone to be able to prompt it, and even if they can't, can they break it? I mean, you've had all the jailbreaking type issues, which again it's not fully gone. And then more recently, really the adoption of MCP. I think that's really the biggest trend I'm seeing right now. So agentic AI, there's a mix of, everybody sort of, tag agents to, an AI use case, but, there's a true, like, agentic type, implementation within the enterprise, where you've got MCP connectors to all of your enterprise application, So, and that's key because ultimately that's the tool that, users consume on a day-to-day basis, and that drives more adoption. Yeah, being able to build complex workflow across different enterprise applications. I think right now is the biggest driver that I'm seeing, and I think this will, accelerate. We've seen recently in the news partnership between, OpenAI and RPA, robotic process automation players like, UiPath, which I was waiting for this. I was like, like for me, agents, it's like sort of V2 of RPA. It's like RPA was like sort of, more deterministic, but now you can add, like a generative side, to it, which, that's very useful. So yes, right now that's what I'm seeing the train going, and I'm sure we'll keep maturing. We're seeing new use cases right now it's on a week, I'd say almost on a weekly basis. If you're connecting to system like Medium, every day there's new article about, I can't even follow now. The agentic architecture is just, it's like dozens of them. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing for now. Yeah.
And how many companies that you're working with are currently deploying agents at scale, agentic workflows, or are they still in that pilot phase and they're ready to, because agentic has been talked about for the last 3 to 6 months. That is the big buzzword that everyone's saying, as you say. A lot of people might be saying that they're doing agentic, but really it is just that RPA piece. How many people are you seeing that are really legitimately doing agentic?
We're starting to see like, actual RFPs, specifically for implementing, agentic platform at scale. As you can expect, it's going to take time. So again, I think the MCP element is going to really enable and accelerate that. But there's no, what's the word? Again, again, it's moving so fast. It's a bit like 2 years ago with RAG. You've got now so many players that are, building agentic platforms. So it's really a matter of, which one will be the main, the main one being implemented. So we're starting to see obviously a few of those that are, that have more adoption. But again, they're not simple, system to implement. There's a lot of, like trial and error as well. So yeah, it will follow its course, and then it's similar to RAG. It will be about use case, prioritization. It won't get implemented everywhere, at once. At the end of the day, it's.
And there's a good reason for this, is because we're dealing with a kind of non-deterministic tool that we haven't dealt with before, and this is one of the important distinctions to be made between robotic process automation and an agentic system. So with automation, you have very specific kind of steps and workflows that it's going to go through. But with an agent, the agent kind of decides, based on a task, it breaks it down into a series of steps. And then at every step, it needs to see what extra information do I need to pull in, or what other actions do I need to take. And then after it does this, it reevaluates where it is and then replans kind of a course until it decides that it's finished. This kind of a system at scale is very complex to do consistently and effectively. So there's a good reason why it's taking time, because it's a new kind of software architecture mixed with startup concepts and innovation and an iterative process, mixed with human psychology. So there's a lot of elements to it. That's why it's taking a long time, as it should.
Just finally, just picking up on, if I may, just driving forward AI in the next few years. I think the technology most definitely, like you said, really great points, but I also think that business will drive AI in the next 2-3 years. when you see what's going on, even the innovation hub out here in Dubai, that people are influenced by what they see and the results and the scale of it. And with that, in time, when everybody sees what they do and the success of it, business will drive the influence of AI massively, I think.
To add on here again, I think what I see also here in the market, or in general outside of the market as well, the trend is companies want to have ready-made use cases. So for corporate functions, if there are use cases, it's very easy to implement. There's not so much hassle, as considering all the 4 pillars that I said, like data, business, infrastructure, everything, then it's a smooth implementation, what I see. But there are also the trends which are currently like, for example, we just had a private equity company. They are buying corporate functions, so ready-made use cases, and then you have other companies as well which are really looking for something specific where they need to train their data. We had there one which was like by creating an advisor, a board advisor, to get them in, but you need a huge amount of data in order to train, in order to perform for you this kind of use case. And it works, it takes time. But again, all the pillars are not prepared. So the preparation takes most the companies like 6 to 12 months just to get ready in order to implement AI.
Yeah, thank you. We've got about 10 minutes left of this session. So I'm going to take some questions for the audience, and I'm going to run around and hand out the microphone. So if we have any questions, Neil? Gonna burn off those pastries.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, everyone. This was great. You talked about data a lot. In a large enterprise company, how do you avoid going through some Accenture PwC of 2 years of verifying, cleaning up data before you actually get any value out of AI? Have you got speedy use cases where you can, rather than trying to get all departments on the same page, that can be a really long process? Have you got any tips, or have you seen any experience where actually you can get to MVP internally within an enterprise super fast on the data side, and then start seeing value on the AI, and then clean up the data on as an iterative process?
Well, the way I look at it is and there's a reason why we talked about data a lot, is because it's absolutely essential. And like you're saying, not all data is created equally, right? So a lot of companies and organizations think they have a lot of data, but then you look at it and how it's stored, and it's horrendous, and things are not clean, and there's redundancy and mistakes and things like that. So my suggestion is to start very small with these very small verticals, right? And don't try to, and you had mentioned another issue with a lot of data in large organizations is that they're siloed, right? So just the process of connecting data across these silos is that massive effort that requires these organizations. So start very small and build generative AI or agentic systems that deal with only 1 or 2 different pockets of these data. And then you mentioned MCP, and MCP is really, really incredible because it could actually help build out this new mesh within the organization. If you build an agent that works with one kind of data, and then that becomes its own MCP server that could then, once you're building out others, they will start to organically connect with each other. So you don't need to have one big project and have that bottleneck of cleaning all the data and doing all the things. You can start small with these small pockets of verified data, have them as MCPs, so the next agent you build can then just call it once it's ready. This would be the approach I'd suggest.
And I think there's one more key success factor in this area. Please cross-collaborate within the company, not silos. Don't build, even if you build an AI project, I would say again, the key success in everything what I see in this change, and I keep it by change, it's if you guys are cross-collaborating, working together. if one function is working, starting with the next function to move on and see how scalable within these two functions and then multiply it. And that's way faster than keeping also the secret source always for yourself within a company. That's also something that most company fails because they are just still working in silos, even within an entire organization.
Yeah. So the way we were doing it like a few years back with, with RAG, for instance, we were not disrupting really like the data access rules. Really focusing on what it is that a user can access himself. Yeah, so you train then a specific use case on their own data. Yeah, so it's the user importing, his data set, and so you maintain that safety with MCP. Obviously, it's, you get that sort of gatekeeper type, model. And then on larger project, really where there's a clearly defined scope of what we want to achieve, like that's where we work with data model and synthetic data. Like we prove the case, can we do X? So a use case, for example, oil and gas. I did, like recently, we were working on health and safety and asset integrity. In that one specifically, like we had to deliver very specific, capability like classification of events and so on. So again, these things that we worked with, an open set of data that was shared by the customer, but then we could create synthetic, event. And ultimately, like that's how we build the application and working with the user, is it what they're after? Once we validate that, actually connecting to the data, is relatively easy. And again, that's something you can scale, so you don't have to connect to, hundreds and hundreds of, sites or different business units. You can do them like in phases, So that's how we approach it. I mean, I think even a few years back, even before LLMs, there was definitely like companies that wanted to create these massive data lakes and consolidate all data to streamline analytics. But it's like really the outcome of that is it doesn't really work. There's always that safety concern. If someone breaches, like data like where everything is hosted, then it's a major issue. So you want to still keep silos and ultimately work around those. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Rob?
And us internally, I mean, you're asking, who is in the business? Every document I open, I need to classify it. Yeah. Is it confidential? Is it restricted? Is it public? Yeah. So, yeah.
Just as I was listening to your answers there for that question, a lot of what I'm seeing comes back to being able to manage the end user expectation as well, right? So to the question here around, hey, what can we do as an MVP? What can we do in maybe 90 days, 120 days? How do you manage that where you've got the client coming in, AI is going to transform everything for me, but I expect it to happen tomorrow, or I expect it to happen in a month, 2 months kind of cycle, versus even some of the examples you've given here, we're maybe looking at a year just to tidy up data, right, before we even start getting on to actually building anything or showing workflows. How do you find managing that expectation, and do you see it evolving, or have you seen that expectation evolve as more clients begin to realize it's not an overnight success?
Okay, I suppose there's two aspects of it. So the way we handle it from our end is we do rapid prototyping. Yeah, so in order to showcase whether something is possible, or what would the experience look like, that's how we do it. And typically we aim for sort of a couple of weeks type engagement. I did one recently where C-level was saying 2 weeks not good enough, can you do it in a week? We did it in 3 days, but I suppose the outcome is could be the same anyway. It's like, well, yes, it's useful, no, it's not, So, I mean, that's how we approach it, ultimately, so we can quickly, again, sort of shape, the direction of, of the project. Now, if you think about scale, is how do you scale this across a business? Yeah, when you're talking to a client who wants to do AI across the board, to scale this, the only way really to do it is you need to scale, like these little pizza teams across, across the business. Because again, for me, like most importantly, on all the AI project we run, you have to be sitting next to the user. Yeah, otherwise you're getting, you don't get the value. You could be working on something for 12 months, and then, you give it to the user, it's like, nah, it's not what I want. So you really need to be iterative, use Agile to deliver a project, and spend time with the actual consumers of, a service.
We've got time for just one more question. Daniel, I think you wanted to...
Thank you, guys. This is perhaps a question for Professor Graham. You mentioned about, in terms of SMEs and the uptick of agentic AI or generative AI within their businesses, does it need to be in a company of 10 people? Does it need to be the founder or MD who needs to, take the baton, or do they hire a brilliant graduate? And then someone related to that, you mentioned the hallucinations. How prevalent is the hallucination? Is it a red herring? Or are they subtle, or are they so egregious that anyone can notice them? Do you have to be a detective? I mean, I think these are all issues for SMEs who are looking to build generative AI into their business. That's just an observation I have in terms of uptick from SMEs. Do you think, is there any merit in that, or what do you see?
Yeah, again, it's just my opinion, not here to be the only opinion, but I can only see what's benefited people and businesses in particular. We're all human beings, and at the end of the day, everyone's valued within a business, but it is the leader of that business and the guy or the person that's created the business to set the example, to, believe in it themselves. If the leader doesn't believe in what it's going to do to the business, then no one else will. But I think, and I can only talk from being a CEO myself, is I surround myself with the best people. Sometimes people that are a lot better at things than I am, and that does start from within. So although my mindset is I'm encouraged by AI and want it to be successful, I will really turn to my team and empower everybody. We have some methodology within the business which is very simple actually, that every 6 months we have post-it notes, and every single person within the business will have a value and a say. Because we found that certain people were quite shy or thought that their opinion wouldn't matter. And they'll make the comment, and then it'll go into the box, and then I'll look through them all. And we found that, again, depending on roles, that anybody will embrace. But back to what you'd asked, it is important that the leaders believe it themselves, and then they can't take it all on themselves, but surround themselves with the best people then to implement it.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think we mentioned it earlier, it's going to be iterative. I mean, us internally, we deploy some tools like, which, 12 months ago, like to automate, for example, documentation, specific responses. If we look a year back, I mean, we're like, it's just not good enough, it's not hitting the point. And I mean, if we look at it now, because the model evolved, over time, you ingest more data into it, you've got more human feedback as well, so, it's getting to a point where it's much better. But even if you look with the public LLMs, if you look at the latest ones now, I mean, they are much better. I mean, if, I use it daily, you can really see the improvement. There's things where, I wouldn't have used it for again, 3 months ago, and I look back now and like, generally it's, on point. Yeah, so it's evolved. Yeah. I mean, there was a major, I used GPT most, ChatGPT. From 4 to 5, there was, massive improvements. I think it's across the board. I mean, we see it with coding. you know, I mean, even 12, you know, again, a year ago, like using those, you know, coding tools, it could take a long time to get to what you want. Like, you know, again, you had to like send them like a very, very clear scope to, you know, get something anywhere near what you have in mind. Last few weeks I was playing again with like V0, for example, and it's, wow, you know, it's actually, in 10 minutes, you know, you can get a real tool, like a real, almost like a real product. So, and I think from an innovation standpoint, that will really, that's the type of innovation which will enable, you know, really anyone across the business to innovate. You know, even like, you know, I mean, I used to code back in the days. Don't really have the time to do it now, but you know, if it takes 10 minutes and a bit of refinement via, you know, prompting, anyone can do it. You know, and that's, you know, what you mentioned earlier about, you know, even you know, if the PA can develop a tool, I think we'll see a lot more of that. That will drive, and ultimately that will drive innovation. And to your point, I mean, hallucination, it's you know, again, LLM generally is, I mean, specifically on that side of AI, it's like children, you know, I mean, if you teach them the wrong thing, they'll know the wrong thing. If you teach them the right thing, you know, they'll be very good at, you know, a very specific topic, you know. And then
like the hallucinations part, this is something that's really it's part of also upskilling on prompt engineering and understanding how do you deal with LLMs, because this is really like, when you really look at the math of how it works, this is a feature, not a bug. It's just, there's no consciousness, it's just determining probability of what's the next best word to say in a sentence. So it's just trying to give you something that makes sense. And prompt engineering just tries to narrow that in a way that gets you to something that is actually true if you want it to be true. Because it doesn't know if you're brainstorming or being creative or silly or not. And the danger, though, here is that we've never dealt with something like this before. Like when, for example, Google was first introduced, we all had to learn how to Google, kind of. We weren't asking questions. We learned what terms to use and stuff. But there was not that element of that you're dealing with a genius 90% of the time, but then a pathological liar the other 10%. And that's very strange to deal with, because even though this is part of my work and I talk about it all the time, I still forget. When I don't add certain things in my prompt of give me something verified and accurate, I'll forget and I'll trust it. And I'll be building like a prototype or something. I'll say, I'm thinking about building this, and it's going to say, wow, that's an amazing idea. That's a fantastic idea. Yeah, of course we can do this. And it starts to generate things, and I start to go in a direction. And then like on the third step, something seems weird, and I say, is this step actually possible? And it says, no, it's not possible at all. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Because I forgot to say at the beginning, be verified and accurate about every step. So we're learning how to deal with this entity. And it's almost like an entity. You know, with teams like with OpenAI and Anthropic, they have teams of scientists called interpretability scientists that are really studying how LLMs are coming to perform. So we're studying LLMs like we're trying to reverse engineer our own brains. We invented the transformer algorithm, but we're still trying to really understand what this thing is. So now as users, we're also understanding how to deal with this entity.
It's not to be scared of failure, I think. Back with the leader, and Netflix are a brilliant example of this. I met with a few heads of innovation, and when you think they created like a recommendation system for Netflix, and I think it's got 200 million subscribers, and it influenced like 80% of the viewing now, and they were prepared to start small, measure impact continuously, fail a lot. But the CEO and everyone was on board and all in on it. And that system has changed their business, scaled it to another level.
Well, I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you all so much. What a session to kick off today. We're going to take a quick coffee break, and we'll be back in about 20 minutes on the top of the hour, ready for our next session. So please meet some new people, grab a coffee, and can we all just give a massive round of applause to all of our panelists for today. Thank you very much.